When the P-51 Mustang first appeared over Europe, German pilots didn't quite know what to make of it. Sleek, fast, and with an unmistakable menace in its silhouette, it didn't fit the stereotype of the easy prey American fighter they were used to swatting from the skies. At first, the Luftwaffe shrugged, another Allied machine to be outturned, outclimbed, and sent spiraling down in flames. But that first impression wouldn't last. From high-altitude escorts to deadly deep strikes, the Mustang began rewriting the rules of aerial combat. This is the shocking truth about what Germany really thought of the P-51 and why it mattered. First sightings. The Luftwaffe's uncertain first impressions. The P-51 Mustang's earliest appearances over Europe in late 1942 barely registered with the Luftwaffe. These were not the sleek, high-altitude killers that would later become infamous, but early Allison-engined versions flying with RAF markings. They were used mostly for low-level reconnaissance and ground attack, fast across the deck, but unimpressive where it mattered most to German fighter command. In the high, cold air where the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf FW-190 dominated. German pilots noted its clean, streamlined fuselage and that unusual belly-mounted air scoop, but many dismissed it as just another Allied oddity. Reports described it as quick near the ground but unsuitable for altitude fighting. Luftwaffe veterans even joked about its engine performance above 15,000 feet, confident it could never seriously threaten them. Then, in mid-1943, everything changed. The new P-51B arrived, now powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Suddenly, the Mustang could climb, fight, and stay at altitude with Germany's best. Worse for the Luftwaffe, it could do so far from Allied territory, appearing deep over the Reich with bombers in tow. For the first time, German pilots began hearing whispers of Allied fighters over Berlin itself. Squadron leaders reported that these newcomers didn't just show up, they lingered, they circled, they cut down bomber attackers before an interception could even form. The Luftwaffe's initial confidence began to erode. What had been a curiosity now looked like a threat that could stalk them beyond their own bases, far from the comfort of friendly airfields. The sleek silhouette once ignored was fast becoming a harbinger of trouble in the skies over Germany. Historical context. The air war over Europe before the Mustang. In the early years of the European air war, the Luftwaffe enjoyed a near-perfect formula for daylight dominance. Their Bf-109s and FW-190s were fast, deadly, and flown by combat veterans hardened in the skies over Spain, Poland, France, and Russia. Allied bombers could reach deep into Germany, but at a devastating cost. American doctrine relied on the idea that tight bomber formations, bristling with defensive guns, could fight their way to the target and back. By 1943, that theory was in tatters. Raids on heavily defended cities like Schweinfurt and Regensburg shredded bomber groups, sometimes with losses exceeding a quarter of the force in a single mission. The British had already shifted to night bombing to reduce casualties, but the US Army Air Forces clung to daylight precision strikes. The problem wasn't just German skill, it was range. Spitfires and early P-47 Thunderbolts could only escort bombers part way. At the edge of their fuel limits, they turned back, leaving the bombers exposed right in the kill zone. Here, the Luftwaffe thrived. Fresh squadrons scrambled from airfields under the bomber routes, climbing above the formations and diving in with coordinated deadly passes. With no fighter cover, bomber crews faced wave after wave of attacks, often over hundreds of miles. For Germany, this was a war-winning equation. Inflict unsustainable losses, force the Allies to halt deep raids, and buy time for their war industry. But that fragile balance depended entirely on one thing, that no Allied fighter could go the distance. When the Merlin-powered Mustang finally entered the fray, that assumption crumbled. The Luftwaffe's safe hunting grounds vanished overnight, replaced by the cold reality that a new predator had arrived and it could follow them anywhere. Technical specifications: why the P-51 was a different kind of threat. The leap from a promising Allied fighter to a Luftwaffe nightmare hinged on a single brilliant change: replacing the Allison engine with the Rolls-Royce Merlin. That marriage transformed the Mustang into a machine that could compete and win at the high altitudes where the war over Europe was truly fought. With the Merlin, the P-51 could push past 440 miles per hour at altitude, climb like a rocket, and hold its speed in the thin, frigid air where German interceptors hunted bombers. But speed alone wasn't the whole story. The Mustang's laminar flow wing, a radical aerodynamic innovation, cut drag dramatically, giving it unprecedented fuel efficiency. When fitted with drop tanks, it could escort bombers on 1,500-mile round trips, an almost unthinkable range for a single-engine fighter in 1944. This erased the Luftwaffe's biggest advantage: the air gap, where Allied escorts turned home and German fighters could pounce without fear. Now Mustangs were there for the entire mission, to the target, over the target, and on the long road home. The Mustang's firepower was equally intimidating. 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns, all mounted in the wings but tightly harmonized, sent streams of lead converging with surgical precision. German pilots, used to cannon fire with visible shell arcs, were unnerved by the Mustang's ability to hit hard at longer ranges without warning. Agility came in unexpected ways. The Mustang could dive faster than a Bf-109 or Fw-190 without losing control, then climb away before an opponent could react. The later bubble canopy gave pilots panoramic vision, turning surprise into an American advantage. And perhaps most demoralizing for the Luftwaffe, the Mustang could take punishment. Hits that would send a Bf-109 spiraling down might only wound a P-51, which would limp home, repaired, and be back in the air the next day. This was not just another escort fighter, it was a predator built for endurance, speed, and the kill. Development journey from British request to American icon. Ironically, the P-51 Mustang began not as an American military project, but as a British request. In 1940, with the Battle of Britain raging, the RAF approached North American aviation with an urgent need for more fighters. Instead of building the P-40 under license, NAJ proposed designing an entirely new aircraft and doing it fast. In just 117 days, the first prototype was ready. The early Allison-powered Mustangs were excellent at low altitude but lacked the high-altitude performance the European air war demanded. The RAF used them for reconnaissance and ground attack, but their potential was clear. The breakthrough came when British engineers fitted the Mustang with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the same power plant driving the Spitfire's success. The marriage of American airframe and British engine transformed the aircraft. Suddenly, it was fast, high-climbing, and capable of fighting at the altitudes where bomber escorts were desperately needed. By late 1943, the U.S. Army Air Forces adopted the Merlin-powered P-51B, sending it into service over Europe. Almost overnight, it began appearing deep over German territory, staying with bombers all the way to their targets and back. For the Luftwaffe, this was a nightmare scenario. Their carefully timed interception tactics, honed over years, now faced an escort fighter that could fight toe-to-toe with their best and still have fuel to chase retreating aircraft. What began as a rushed British contract had evolved into one of the most decisive fighters of the war, and soon Germany would know it firsthand. Combat encounters: how Mustang tactics undermined German strategy. When the Merlin-powered P-51 Mustang entered full-scale service in early 1944, it hit the Luftwaffe like a sucker punch. For years, German interception doctrine was precise: scramble from airfields close to the bomber stream's projected path, climb to altitude, and tear into the bombers before the escorts could intervene. Their short-range fighters, the Bf-109 and Fw-190, didn't have the fuel to linger, but they didn't need to. The air gap left by Allied escort fighters meant bombers were naked in the most dangerous part of the mission. The Mustang killed that advantage overnight. Instead of peeling away halfway into Germany, P-51 escorts flew in with the bombers, then surged ahead to sweep the skies clean. Luftwaffe formations were being bounced before they could even form up for an attack. Veteran German pilots were stunned to find Allied fighters over their airfields as they took off or landed, a violation of what they thought were safe zones. The Mustang's speed and dive meant American pilots dictated every fight. They refused turning duels, instead using boom and zoom strikes, dive hard, fire a deadly burst, and climb away before a counterattack was possible. Luftwaffe aces trained in the honor-bound art of dogfighting found themselves chasing shadows and burning precious fuel for nothing. Perhaps most devastating was the Mustang's persistence. With drop tanks, it could stay in the fight for hours, circling, climbing, and diving again. German bomber and reconnaissance crews who once operated deep in their own territory now had to contend with Mustangs that seemed to appear from nowhere. The result was more than just tactical frustration, it was a strategic chokehold. The Luftwaffe no longer controlled when, where, or how the air war over Germany would be fought. The P-51 had taken that power away. German intelligence assessments, from dismissal to dire warnings. When the Mustang first appeared in Luftwaffe intelligence briefings in 1942, it barely earned a footnote. Analysts described it as fast at low altitude, but unsuitable for high-level fighter combat. At the time, early Allison-engined versions confirmed that impression. They struggled above 15,000 feet, where most decisive engagements took place. The Germans assumed it would remain a niche ground attack aircraft, much like the RAF's Typhoon. That assumption collapsed with the arrival of the P-51B in late 1943. Combat reports from the Eastern and Western fronts began describing an Allied fighter that could fly farther, climb faster, and fight longer than any they had encountered. Luftwaffe staff officers were stunned by the range figures. With drop tanks, the Mustang could accompany bombers all the way to Berlin and back. This erased their most reliable defensive advantage, unescorted bombers in the heart of Germany. By spring 1944, internal memos carried a very different tone. The Mustang was labeled a priority threat requiring immediate countermeasures. Fighter units were warned not to engage unless holding an altitude advantage or numerical superiority. Tactics were hastily revised, high-speed head-on passes, vertical dives to escape, and attempts to lure Mustangs into flak zones. Pilot debriefs grew increasingly grim. Some reported being hit from extreme ranges by the Mustang's nose-mounted 6.50 caliber guns. Others noted that once a P-51 was behind you, escape was nearly impossible. Its diving speed and acceleration closed gaps in seconds. By mid-1944, the Mustang wasn't just an aircraft in German intelligence files. It was a constant factor in every defensive operation, a presence that forced changes in tactics, deployment, and even aircraft design. For the Luftwaffe, the days of dismissing it as a minor threat were long gone. Legacy and impact. How the P-51 changed the Luftwaffe's war. The P-51 Mustang's true legacy wasn't just in its victories, it was in how it reshaped the entire air war over Europe. Before its arrival, daylight bombing was a gamble. Every deep strike into Germany cost dozens of bombers, forcing painful questions about whether the campaign could continue. The Mustang changed that calculus almost overnight. With its unmatched range, the P-51 could escort bombers from English bases to targets deep inside the Reich and back. This protection didn't just reduce bomber losses. It allowed Allied air forces to keep the pressure on Germany's industrial heartland without pause. Factories, oil refineries, rail yards all came under relentless attack, and the Luftwaffe could no longer pick off unprotected formations at will. More devastating was the Mustang's role in bleeding away the Luftwaffe's veteran corps. German aces, many with hundreds of kills, were suddenly being hunted in their own skies. Each loss was irreplaceable. By 1944, the training pipeline was producing green pilots with minimal flight hours, men thrown into combat against some of the best-trained fighter pilots in the world. The imbalance was catastrophic. The Mustang also shaped German aircraft development. Projects like the Ta-152 high-altitude fighter and the Me-262 jet gained urgency in direct response to the Mustang's dominance. But by the time these advanced designs appeared in meaningful numbers, fuel shortages, bombed factories, and exhausted pilots made them too little, too late. In the years since, the P-51 has become a symbol of Allied air power, sleek, lethal, and unstoppable. For the Luftwaffe, it marked the moment their defensive strategy collapsed. For history, it stands as proof that in modern air war, speed, range, and persistence can break even the most seasoned enemy. In the end, the P-51 Mustang's true victory wasn't just in its kill count, it was in the way it rewrote the Luftwaffe's playbook and stripped away their confidence. What began as an overlooked design became the ultimate hunter, chasing German fighters from the skies they once ruled. It proved that range, speed, and precision could outmatch even the most seasoned opponents, and that air superiority could be won not just by technology, but by marrying the right machine to the right strategy. Even today, when a Mustang's Merlin engine roars at an air show, it's a sound that still echoes the moment Germany's skies were lost forever.